Hey folks, Jon McCaskill here from the Men Talking Mindfulness podcast. Will and I are in between seasons right now, but we did this interview a few months ago with a good friend of ours, fellow retired Navy SEAL Commander Chris Irwin, who we attended a retreat with in Costa Rica a while back. But because we're in between seasons right now, this is Chris interviewing us on his podcast called Rare Sense, where you can go to level up your mental health. Now, Chris was kind enough to lend us this audio from that interview, and this is his podcast disclaimer. Rare Sense is not medical advice, nor does it represent the official opinions of any other organizations or persons. If you require diagnosis or treatment, please seek it from a licensed professional. That all said, I will turn it over to Chris.
What's up, guys? How's it going?
Good, Chris. Good to be here. Thanks for having us on the show.
Yeah,
man. Thanks so much. Honored to be here, brother.
When was the last time we saw one another? Was it a year ago?
A year and a half? A year and like 3 months ago?
Yeah, we've spoken since then.
Since. Yeah, I don't remember seeing you since.
No, I don't think so.
Social media.
I don't think so. Let's start off with just quick background for people that aren't familiar with you individually or what you do collectively, which we'll obviously talk about as well. Just quick kind of synopsis. Whoever wants to go first, doesn't matter.
Yeah, Will, why don't you go first?
Will, you go first.
Sure. Hey, Will Schneider here in New York City. I've been teaching like mindfulness yoga and meditation for, since like 2009. I've been a practitioner of mindfulness for over 20 years. I run Men Talking Mindfulness, co-host and co-produce with Jon McCaskill. We're slowly growing. The show is going very well, and it's always an exciting creative process that we continually move through together. And I don't know, that's kind of my little self in a nutshell, I think. We can find out more as we go through.
Right. This is me in a nutshell.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right, man.
I'm trying to get out.
All right. Yeah. So I guess it's my turn now. So Jon McCaskill, I'm like you, Chris, a retired team guy, SEAL, and found my way to mindfulness and meditation while I was in the teams due to my own struggles with anxiety and depression, survivor's guilt, and some other things. And finally got introduced to meditation and mindfulness along that way, along that journey, because it was the only thing that truly helped. I'd been on medications that definitely helped to numb the pain and the anxiety and the sadness, but it also numbed any kind of sense of fulfillment or joy or drive. And I just kind of felt empty. And I finally did have a counselor recommend it to me, mindfulness and meditation. And we'll get into that a little bit more, but I attribute mindfulness and meditation to not only changing my life for the better, but quite literally saving my life. And now I teach it. I teach mindfulness and meditation so that I can pay it forward, because I feel it's a duty and an obligation to do so. So now I am living in Colorado Springs. I've got 3 young kids and a beautiful wife. We live on a small farm, and I co-host Men Talking Mindfulness with my brother from another mother right there, Will.
So let's start there. I think that's a really good place to start. Can you just, I wanted you to kind of get a little more into what you were feeling, right? And like, what did that mean for you? You said anxiety, depression, survivor's guilt.
Yeah.
How did that express itself for you? And then talk about where it went with the medication route too, because I'd love to know what you were on, why they thought that would be helpful.
Sure.
Because I'm one of these people that I'm not anti-meds.
Yeah.
I think that they have their place. I think, however, we rely too heavily on them, and it's a mind and body separation problem where we feel like we have to find a pill that's going to help us with our mind, which we can impact in so many other ways that don't involve medication or ingesting something even, right?
Yeah. I mean, at least the common medications that you hear about, I mean, Prozac, Zoloft, Trintellix, you name the list. There are SSRIs that are out there, and I've probably been on every single one of them for anxiety and depression. What anxiety felt like to me was I didn't fear death per se, but I just feared every day. I feared like tomorrow is just going to be worse than it was today. And the next day is going to be worse. The next day is going to be worse. And that's kind of how I felt about every day, and just caused this tightening. Even as I'm saying that, I'm feeling tightening, right? Tightening in my shoulders, my back, my forehead, and just this overwhelming kind of sense like I just don't want to get to tomorrow. I just want today to be the day, and I don't want to get in tomorrow. And then the depression was the exact opposite. It was, man, I screwed this up yesterday, or I could have done this better, or 5 years ago, if only I had done this or said this, I could have saved someone's life. I could have changed someone's life, quite literally. On the battlefield. And I felt as though I didn't deserve to be here after I'd lost some of my friends that I felt in my mind at that point were better human beings. They were fathers, they were husbands, and they were very effective leaders in the teams. They were effective leaders in the community. And here I was, I just didn't feel up to par with them. Kind of have that imposter syndrome. And because they were lost and I was alive, I felt sad because of it. And so the two together, the anxiety and the depression, manifested ultimately in physical pain, but then even more so, very dark thoughts about, do I take my life? Do I deserve to be here? And again, the medications, I'm not anti-medication. I just feel that at times people use them for too long, or in the wrong way, and they can be very effective in saving someone if they're in a crisis. I've been there, and I do feel that they did help, but they also, like I said, took away that drive and that sense of joy and sense of fulfillment. I just felt like a hollow shell of who I had been at one point. And I wanted to get back to the John McCaskill that, 21-year-old, not in age and body, but just in the drive and the fulfillment that I had back at that time. And that's when I sought help, because I was definitely seeking, or rather I was definitely thinking about taking my life. I hadn't put a plan into action. I wasn't along that far, but I was just like, you know what, I don't deserve to be here. And I knew I was in a bad state. So sought out that help. And luckily, the counselor was brave enough to recommend mindfulness and meditation to someone who at that time, this is 6-7 years ago, and it's becoming more accepted within these communities. But 6-7 years ago, it wasn't. And for him to step up and be like, hey, I want you to try this, that was pretty bold of him. And in all honesty, I laughed at him. I was like, no, man, I've got some serious shit going on. This is not going to help. I don't want to sit in the lotus position and chant. Yep. I didn't think anything. I thought it was for hippies, monks, and weirdos.
Yeah.
And I never felt that. I didn't know the science behind it.
You're offending Will with the hippies comment.
Fucking egg, dude.
I'm not going to offend him any more than I've already offended him in the past.
I'm over it completely. You've already come over, both of you, to the dark side, or to the light side.
Light side.
Out of the darkness into the light of mindfulness.
That's right. Yeah, so that's my quick down and dirty.
And is that the counselor that recommended, was it the same one who had recommended medications? Or
no.
Prescribed them?
No, so I had gone to psychiatrists for the medications. Okay. And then this guy was a psychologist, a Navy psychologist. I wish I knew his name. I would love to find him and say, hey, man, that crazy shit that you recommended 6 or 7 years ago? Not only do I practice it, but now I teach it. So, yeah, man, so it was a psychologist, a Navy psychologist that recommended it.
Man, it's funny. I guess even the stuff that we've experienced together in terms of healing, I didn't realize how similar our stories are. Like in terms of the experience, not necessarily exactly what happened, but the same exact feelings. And the way I put that out in the content that I have is, you pretty much said it, but the opposite of presence, of kind of awareness in the moment, is either storytelling, what I call storytelling, which is looking at the past and trying to make sense of it and injecting meaning where it doesn't necessarily even exist.
Right.
And then how you get lost in that and stuck in those loops, or fear, right? Which is looking forward with, anticipation and anxiety and all of those things. And it's like the more time we spend either lost in storytelling or lost in fear, the less, like, the worse we are.
Sure.
And the more we're just not present, right? And it really does, for me, come down to those two things, and then trying to like find the opposite of those. Because the reality is our mind does go back and forth a lot. We don't,
of course,
as present as we try to be, we still think about things that might happen in the future or ruminate on the past. But it's like, okay, well, how do you do that in a way that's not storytelling or in fear, right?
Yeah, I love the word that you use there. And when I do talk to people about what I do now, I specifically use the word ruminate about the past. That's the difference, right? Reminiscing about the past.
Yeah,
that's great. Looking at pictures, thinking about the past, things that happened, whether they're good or bad, thinking about them. But ruminating and like trying to, in your mind, almost change the narrative because of the past and say, you know what, I screwed this up, but if I had done this, if I had done that, it doesn't matter, because guess what? You're not going to change it. Right. So why bother? So don't ruminate, don't waste your time, don't waste your energy, don't get into that depression. Reminiscing is great. Same thing with the future, right? Worrying about the future, fear about the future, that's the anxiety. But thinking about the future, planning for it, hey, okay, maybe I'm engaged, I'm thinking about my wedding, and I'm thinking about, having kids, and that's great. But worrying about it, that's completely different. And that's where we need to make sure we're not ruminating and not worrying, or at least minimizing those two things.
Right. And my solutions for those things are, if it's backwards, if we're talking about something we were thinking about in the past, it's one, acceptance of whatever it may be, and then gratitude, right? So like the opposite for me of the storytelling is acceptance and gratitude. It's just getting that mindset, just being thankful for things. And you can always find something to be thankful for. And then the opposite of fear is curiosity, and then ultimately intent, what you're talking about, right? Planning. So it's taking anything that you might be afraid of, especially if it's going on in your body, like you talked about pain and things like that, and turning that into curiosity. Just, you can be interested by it. You can be interested by anything that you find fearful, you can instead be interested by.
Right. Yeah.
And then setting intention, right? And we can get into that. So, okay, I want to try to, I've never done a 3-way interview like this. So this is an interesting challenge for me to try to like share, but interrupt whenever. You guys do this all the time. You're pros, I should say. You have your own podcast that you've been doing longer than I have, so you know how to do this kind of thing better. So, Will, do you have a similar story? Like, so this is how Jon got to mindfulness in his life. Do you have a similar story? What's your background that kind of got you to that approach and practice?
So I left, I had a corporate job. So I got out of college, like, when did I graduate? Like 97 or 96. I had a degree in biology. I went on and for 6 years and worked in a pharmaceutical company in their laboratories, and I hated it. And I just felt lost. And
wow, you were really part of the evil empire, huh?
I didn't realize how evil it was like 20 years ago, right?
Pharmaceutical company. Oh my God.
I was like in the laboratories, like, making shit and like fermenters, I was doing microbial fermentation. And I just like, I never had the opportunity, because I was like an athletic kid and I ended up playing basketball, like, and I love basketball, played all through college. That's just the way that I kind of expressed myself. And, life, came at me pretty good after college, and just kind of being lost in, who the fuck am I? And had a broken heart. That broken heart led me to begin to step on the path of a creative life as an actor here in New York City. And I just was like, I just wanted to be more present on stage. I wanted to be more relaxed. I wanted to be more calm. And I started looking up, I think it was like in 2006, 2007, I just started looking up meditation, because I don't know where or how or who kind of clued me into this would be something that would help me, just to relax my anxiety on camera, on stage, in class. And I'm still a very anxious person anyway. And I just started meditating, actually with TM in the transcendental meditation. And that's just been, I don't necessarily use TM all the time now, but I do meditate every day, whether it's like a breath meditation. I always throw some gratitude meditation. And it's just helped me, like you guys, in some ways. It's just like, I don't know why or where all this anxiousness has come. I think it actually comes a lot from my mom. She's, I love you, Mom. She's an anxious person, and she still lives through a hell of a lot of anxiety. And I think I just that just was part of my first nature, just by, being raised by my mom, my dad. And so I just use it all the time to just try to, like you guys were talking about, just to be more present and not ruminate on the past, which, like, I find myself jumping into the past and trying to win arguments that happened in the past or something. You know what I mean? It's like, it's ridiculous. Or how I'm going to win them in the future,
right.
When opportunity, presents itself again, and, it's just been very helpful, and it's just been so rewarding for me that I just kind of, towards the end of my acting career, about 12 years ago now, I started, taking that second step instead of just, practicing on my own with, yoga came into my life shortly after I started meditating, and I was practicing consistently for a good couple of years, and I ended up getting trained and certified, and I was like, this just seems like something that I'm really started to enjoy, just to see people just kind of transform in just like an hour's class, and I just wanted to be able to help them do that. And I just stepped into the teaching world of this, and ever since I did, it's like, you kind of, when you meet the path you're supposed to be on, the doors open, and that's exactly what happened. And now it's just been a pleasure to do all the work I've been doing for like the last over decade of just helping people understand these practices in a basic way and help them just, get to a baseline of health.
Yeah.
Which we can grow a lot from there,
Yeah.
For sure.
So Jon, getting back to kind of where you were with this, and this counselor who said, hey, why don't you try some meditation? And you were like, yeah, screw you, dude. That's not what I need. I need drugs.
Yeah.
Exactly.
What happened from there? So what did you adopt, and how'd the process go?
Well, the irony, Chris, is that I had learned a little bit of this on the shooting range. I'm sure you had learned something to the effect of, hey, relax, let's control your breathing. Like, I learned box breathing on the shooting range. Nobody told me that it was a mindfulness practice. Nobody told me it was a form of meditation, if you will. But they had told me, hey, if you want to calm your heart rate down, if you want to calm your breathing down, just do a 4 count of box breathing. Okay, sure, no problem.
Real quick, just for anyone that doesn't know what that is.
Oh, yeah, great point. Man, I'm a quote-unquote professional podcaster, and I screwed that up. So box breathing.
That's why I'm here, man.
Yeah, thanks, man. For those who are listening who are not familiar with box breathing, it's basically you just breathe in for a count of 4. That's the first edge of the box. You hold for a count of 4. That's the top of the box. You breathe out for a count of 4. That's the other edge of the box. And you hold for a count of 4. That's the bottom of the box. And you do that 4 or 5 times. And that literally resets your body. It taps into the parasympathetic nervous system. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system so that you calm down. Your respiratory rate decreases. Your heart rate decreases. And you can do that just about anywhere.
And for anyone that doesn't know, parasympathetic side of your nervous system is your what quote unquote rest and digest, right?
Right, exactly.
Sympathetic is kind of fight or flight. That's activating, which is weird. I think intuitively we always think sympathetic should be the rest, but I agree.
I totally agree.
The way I remember it is I think of a parachute.
Same.
Parasympathetic. That's how I remember.
Yep, exactly. So, I was taught, and again, the physiology wasn't explained to me on the range. It wasn't told, hey, you're going to tap into the parasympathetic. It was just, hey, this is a way to calm yourself down. So I was doing that, and I did that a few times throughout my career to control my shooting. That said, fast forward to where I'm struggling with the anxiety, the depression, and I've got this counselor telling me to practice these weird things, mindfulness and meditation. I laugh at him at first, and then he's like, hey, well, okay, what if I told you that I could give you a pill and this is going to sound rehearsed because it's part of my talks, but if I could give you a pill that was going to change your performance for the better, both personally and professionally, mentally and physically. So yeah, hell yeah, doc. I mean, as a type A personality, we're always looking for an edge, right? We're looking for an edge over the enemy on the battlefield, or we're looking for an edge over our best buddy right next to us, right? We're always looking for an edge. So I was like, yeah, doc, I'll take that. Well, guess what? It's not a pill. It's mindfulness and meditation. So now he's selling it to me as performance enhancement. So, my knuckle dragging self, I'm like, performance enhancing, I'm going to do this. Type A personality, I'm going to do an hour-long meditation. So the very next day I go and download like this, I think it was Insight Timer at the time, sit down for an hour-long meditation, and I start listening to the guidance and start focusing on my breathing. And then about 17 seconds later, my mind is everywhere except on the meditation. My mind is on the fact that I have to pay my taxes, the fact that I got to change the oil on my truck, the fact that I got to pick up the dog crap in my yard, everything except this meditation in the here and now. It is the exact thing that you're telling me about the anxiety and the depression, fear of the future and the storytelling of the past. It's everything except being present in that moment. So I go back to that doc. I'm like, yeah, man, that meditation stuff, it was crap. It didn't work. It was crap, and I'm too busy. Like, I'm just too busy a person. I've got too much stuff going on in my life. Everybody who does meditate must live in a cave or just cannot have stuff going on.
This is so great because you are the stereotypical person that I talk about, and I'm sort of similar too. Of the
completely.
Hey, I tried meditation once and it didn't work.
Exactly.
That idea, which is so strange. And I always say it's just like saying, well, I went to the gym once and I didn't need to shake.
Exactly. So that's what I told the guy. I was like, hey, look, man, I tried that meditation. I tried to do an hour long, made it about 17 seconds. He's like, well, what did what kind of meditation did you do? This. And he's like, well, that's like going to the gym and getting under, the barbell with 350 pounds and never having lifted weights before, or like lining up at the starting line of a marathon without ever having run a step before.
Yeah.
That, and if you go into the weight room and you do lift and you come out of the weight room, do you expect to be ripped and shredded and just, your entire life to have been changed? No. So then I was like, okay, maybe I should take a step back.
Isn't that amazing, though, that's lost on us?
Yeah.
We completely understand that with physical training.
Right, the physical training. But the mental training,
you're like,
you expect it to happen
of course not. It's not like I just went and lifted and all of a sudden I've never done it before and I've got a six-pack now.
Right, exactly.
And the fact that we can't draw that parallel just amazes me.
Right. But yes, I think with the mind, we just expect it to be like a switch.
Yeah. Well, and it can be to some extent. I mean, the thing that I say is obviously you can change your perception and your mood in the moment. The difference is what the training does, what mindfulness and all these other things do, is it helps you do that faster, better, more often. Right.
Mm-hmm. And for longer.
Yeah. Right? So I mean, can you change your mood? Can you decide to do that? Yeah, you can, but you're more likely to do it more often, better, for longer, all of those things, and build up sort of patterns of behavior if you adopt a practice behind it.
Right. I mean, it's the physical analogy is still there, right? Hey, if you do 10 curls, your biceps feel like they've worked, and then you look at them for a second, they're like, oh yeah, it's definitely bigger. But then an hour later, you're like, okay, it's not.
Yeah.
But, go ahead, Will.
It's tough. No, it's tough to measure the mind, and plus, like we've used the mind so much, or the mind is rewarded so much for our intelligence, for our memory, for like recalling this, or it's used as something that's strategic or a tool. But then being asked to just focus, and then the results of focusing, or you don't necessarily see really quick results of focusing, and to be able to train the mind to relax and focus the mind is just so. I just feel it's so foreign to our society, and it's not respected at all. And now it finally is. I mean, it's nice that guys like you are starting to speak up, and realize how the importance of mental training and I think we're seeing it more in sports. There's definitely a huge focus on meditation and mindfulness, and because it really does enhance everything we're doing because we are able to enhance our focus.
Well, I think it's a lack of ability to understand that your thought patterns you don't have to identify with them. You don't have to say, this is me. And that is a difference with our physical bodies. It's kind of like I work out and I get it and I see the results there and it's me and the body's doing the work. And whereas when you're meditating, you're stepping out of your mind a little bit. I mean, it's still there. It's one of these things. Sam Harris talks about. We feel like we are standing on the edge of a river, watching the river, like we're observing our lives, sort of like we're this kind of entity that floats around in our head and sees things from a perspective. But the reality is, you are the river. You are the experience. The weird thing is that the river can look at itself. It can experience itself, which is the bizarre part of consciousness, the fact that we can do that. But because of that, it means that you don't have to lock yourself into these thought patterns that happen. It's just a stream of information. And as soon as you can sort that out and realize that, then it's like an awakening of, hey, wait a minute, I don't need to, that's not my thoughts necessarily. They're just thoughts. It's like a television or a radio or anything like that, right? So Jon, did you have an aha moment where it was like after committing to this practice a little more, where you're like, oh yeah, it's probably going to take me more than once to.
Yeah. I mean, I felt like a complete dumbass, right, in that moment. Right. And then my next aha moment was about 2 or 3 months later, when now I've gone back and, the doc introduced me. Okay, let me rewind a little bit. So I tell the doc that what I'd done, and he's like, okay, he explains the analogy there. And he's like, well, why don't we start with some box breathing? And at that point, like, light bulb went up.
Yes.
Box breathing. I've done this before. And so he introduced me to box breathing, not on the range though. I'm just sitting there in his office and I do the box breathing and I'm like, okay, yeah, I actually do feel a little bit better right now in this moment. But then I left the office and I get in the car and I get, in traffic and I'm like flipping the bird to the guy right next to me who cut me off. And I'm like, okay. So maybe I should do some box breathing while I'm driving. So I do some box breathing and it calms me down. And then I would do it a few times throughout my day. And then I would go back and visit him. He's like, okay, well, now you've got box breathing down. Let me introduce you to a couple other things. And he introduced me to a couple other things. And I started practicing. And about 2 or 3 months later, I had somebody come up to me and they're like, Jon, what are you on? What are you taking? I'm like,
high on life, brother.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. I used to have that poster with the hot air balloons.
Yep, I'm high on life.
That's what the hippies say. Yeah,
that's it.
So, he comes up to me. He's like, "What are you on?" I'm like, "Well, funny enough, I'm actually off of everything. I've come off of everything, and I'm now this is another sense of anxiety. I'm anxious about telling this person that I'm meditating because it is, in my mind, still kind of a weird thing for people to do. So I take a chance. I'm like, hey, well, I've actually started meditating. And in my mind, I'm thinking his eyes are going to glaze over. He's going to turn around and walk away and tell all his friends, hey, Jon's turning into a hippie. He's a total weirdo. And that didn't happen. He was like, what? Meditation? What? How did you get into that? Tell me more. And then he was like, well, hey, could you teach me? And I was like, well, I'm not a teacher of any sort. I'm just going through it myself. He's like, well, maybe we could just do it together. And we started doing it. And then, about another 2 or 3 months later, we had another couple of guys in there and they were doing it. And I was like, holy shit, this is something that I could help people to do. Help people do in their own lives, change their lives for the better, potentially even save their lives. So those were some aha moments there as well, right? The aha moment in, oh man, I'm a dumbass. I can't just practice this one time and expect it to change my life. The second aha was, oh man, box breathing. I've been doing that. Why can't I do it, in the car? Why can't I do that at the house? Why can't I do it with, in my relationship? And then fast forward, and then I get introduced to this guy. I don't get introduced, but he comes up and he's like, what are you taking? What are you on? Like, oh man, there is a change. Something has shifted in how it's not a drastic change. It's just like looking in the mirror every day when you're working out, right? You're not going to notice that drastic change. But you fast forward and you look in the mirror 2 months later, you're going to see a change. You're going to feel a change too. Well, the same thing mentally. I started to feel that change.
So last thing on this, when did it impact your actual issues that you were dealing with, the actual anxiety and depression? At what point did something happen there where it made an impact for you?
Yeah. I think I didn't realize that it had until I saw that the performance, quote unquote, performance enhancing stuff was there. And I was like, oh, you know what? I'm performing better at work. I'm performing better in my relationships. I'm performing better on my own, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And then I realized, oh, you know what? I haven't been anxious about tomorrow. It wasn't this switch where I was like, I'm anxious about tomorrow. I'm anxious. Oh, suddenly I'm not. It was just at some point I realized I'm not anxious about tomorrow, and I'm not sad about yesterday. And if I am, coming back to what you talked about before, Chris, I don't define myself as anxious. I'm like, hey, I'm experiencing some anxiety about this particular thing, right?
Yeah.
Or I'm experiencing some sadness about this particular thing, but that doesn't define Jon as anxious or sad.
Yep.
And I think that was, probably 3 months after I'd been practicing regularly that I started to see and actually notice that change in myself, although it had been there before.
That's really cool that it happened kind of under the surface for you.
Yeah.
And it wasn't up front and in your face. That's awesome. That's like one of those things, those radical transformation videos where the person doesn't realize how much weight they've lost, and then they step on the scale and it's like, oh my God, I lost 200 pounds.
Or they do the time lapse where they've taken a picture every day for like 100 days, right?
Right.
I think if you had taken a picture of my brain, or if there was some way to take a picture of my heart and my emotions over that 100 days every day, you would see the difference. It would be drastic, but because you see it every day and you feel it every day, you don't notice it.
Man, there's a bunch of stuff in here that I kind of want to touch on a little bit without belaboring the point. But one is the thing you said about not having to be an anxious person or a depressed person. And man, I think that's such a tough thing for people to get over, myself included, of thinking I have anxiety like forever. Right. It's like a disease that I've been stricken with, and getting to the point where I think what I talk about is kind of the last hurdle in terms of recovery, although this is a lifelong discipline in my mind. But in terms of really changing who you are, so to speak, and adopting new patterns, is you can't believe that you are still afflicted by some outside disease. I mean, we think about these things this way, like anxiety disorder and chronic this, and it's as if you caught it, like it's contagious or something like that.
Yeah, right.
And it's not. It's just a pattern of behavior. But every time you express something like, I'm an anxious person, or I'm a depressed person, I have depression, I have anxiety, you are just reinforcing an unhelpful belief. And even if you feel that way, this is the part that's difficult. You have to get out of that practice and start saying, no, I used to have that problem, but I don't have that anymore. Right. Even as you're still feeling it. And I think that's so tricky. One of the guys that in some of the stuff that we've done together, one of the facilitators down there, I mean, he said that to me about my chronic illness stuff. He's like, you got to stop saying that you have a chronic illness. It's like, I have a friend who had something similar, and he moved towns. And when he got to the new town, he decided that he was going to make a clean break and not talk about that anymore and not tell anybody about that. And it completely changed his life because he was identifying that way. So then other people saw him that way. Right. And it just reinforced that unhelpful belief. Right. And you have to get out of that practice. The other point that I just want to harp on is, man, the glacial pace of this stuff is so critical to understand, because exactly what you did in terms of like, okay, I'm going to adopt this. I'm going to do it an hour a day. And blah, blah, blah. That is so much part of, I would say, our culture writ large, but especially for alpha types and people with our background of just like, I'm going to do it twice as much and I'm going to go as hard as possible. And you can do that. Like, that's okay. But easing your way into this kind of stuff, especially for me, like I've got this Rare Sense challenge out right now where it's like 20 minutes of all these different things.
Yeah.
And to some extent, it's great. Like if I encourage people to try it, obviously, because I want them to adopt these practices. But it can be almost more effective to just adopt one practice for 5 or 10 minutes a day and get that as part of your patterns of behavior than trying to do it all at once. I find this with myself. It's like you feel the weight of, I got to do this and that and the other thing. And it's like, build up the habit of just incremental changes and how that accrues over time. And don't expect the results to come overnight. I mean, it's just so, it's counterintuitive for us because we just think the answer is harder, faster, more.
Right.
And it's not in this circumstance. Like you'll get there eventually, but it's sort of like saying, I want to train for a marathon. So tomorrow I'm going to just start with like 20 miles. It's like, okay, you can do that. Super painful and might not even be the right approach. And isn't necessarily going to set you up for success, right? So anyway, Will, so when you kind of started doing this as well, did you have a similar experience? Was it like kind of life altering? Did you have an aha moment? Was there a light bulb that went on?
What's that? Yeah, I remember like I was reading a lot of books at this time as well, like about, I remember Mihai Csikszentmihalyi book came out in like 2003, the Flow. So I was reading Flow, and that led me to all sorts of books about like, being present, being, alive in the moment. And I remember reading a book, I think it was called Lucid Dreaming. And I was so attached, like we talked about earlier, and I think we're all just so identified with our mind and its belief systems, and and they talk about it in the Buddhism, like how as we continually identify ourselves and continually move through these patterns of behavior based on that identity, they're called sankhara, and we just keep moving through that rut all the time, and it's really tough to kind of pull ourselves out and take an objective, like wide angle kind of view of the river of life, instead of like we're kind of lost in its currents very actively all the time. If you don't practice or, if you don't take a breath. But I remember reading this book and I'm on the subway and they're making some sort of distinction between the mind and you being present. And something about the question is like, well, who is the person that says, my hand, my brain, my, clothes, right? And I was like, whoa, what? That's a good question. Like, who is this I that I'm talking about? And then in the book, like, he's like, well, I remember he had me like switching back from the reality of my mind and then just be fully alive in the moment on the subway in that moment. I just remember going back and forth, kind of toggling in that moment. And I was like, oh, wait, like, that's what presence is. Like, that's what awareness
breathe
is.
Breathe in the subway air. And
breathe in, exactly. Smell the bum next to you, right? And then try not to judge, or something, right? And I think that was like a really big moment for me. Like when I began to, like, who is the person, who is the one that says my hand, right? My nose, right? And I was like, whoa, like, so that just, and then that just opened me up. And I just kept following that thread of like, how can I be more present? What does it take to become more present? And like you said earlier about like, it's like this very slow glacier melt of development that it's like little baby steps. Like you said, just a 5-minute practice, once a day or a couple times a day. And you just slowly walk yourself in to more presence, into more mindfulness, identifying yourself with the moment instead of all the things that happened to your past or all the expectations that have been like lobbed on top of you without you even knowing it, from who knows, as a soldier, as a son, as a worker in some capacity. So it's really, it's a nonstop revelation as well. Like one thing, part of my practice now is just keeping my fucking mouth shut. Like when sometimes, like instead, you know what I mean?
I
like
think we could all benefit from adopting that practice a little bit.
I totally agree. Like that's what a lot of other people tell me too, Chris. Yeah, thank you.
It would make for a great podcast if you just sat there with your mouth shut
and just shake my head.
That's like there's an old God, what is it called? There's an old song from the 90s which is sort of making fun of grunge rock and alternative rock, and the concept, I don't know if it's right off the bat in the song, but eventually it's, we just didn't play our instruments. Like that's the music's original alternative is silence. So he's like, and then they loved us. I don't know if he can sell a record that's got nothing on it. And he's like, just tell them we're from Seattle. And it's like, he advanced us $2.5 million.
Yeah.
And he's like, we go on MTV Unplugged and we refuse to play acoustic versions of the songs we refused to play in the first place. And then we smashed our shit, right? Like it's a great concept. So
love it.
Anyway, getting off track, but that made me remind me of that.
Oh, good.
So yeah, Will, you were practicing something where you just kept your mouth shut. That's
I mean, I just like
that was the original comment.
Yeah, that's right. I'm just learning to listen more. Like that's kind of where my practice is now, to listen more intently, to just be more present, and try not to like insert myself or insert a story, and
like
and
I
it's
just
just
did.
nice. What's it? Like I just did, exactly.
Like I just did. Yeah.
Like you just, well, right.
Yeah.
Like we all do in a lot of cases, but it's like, I get to pick when, or is this really going to be helpful to the conversation? Is it going to move the conversation forward in some ways?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
yeah, no, totally. I think it is in our nature to try to assert ourselves so much. And I would say culture these days is kind of hinged on that. Like social media, it's all about inserting your opinion on everything.
That's a great point. Mm-hmm.
And we've lost the ability to listen to one another. And yeah, I agree with that. And I'm not very good at it either in terms of trying to have a conversation with somebody. And it's a conversation, which means it's back and forth and you both need to speak,
right.
But letting the person make their point and really listening to what they're saying, looking in the eyes and trying to make sure that they recognize you understand what they're saying,
Yeah.
We just don't do that. It's like we just want to, we're just waiting for the other, what we're not doing, we're not listening. We're just waiting for them to finish talking so I can make my point. Right. And that's what we do so much of. Yeah. So how did you guys, go ahead.
We had an episode on the Men Talking Mindfulness podcast about that very thing with Ryan Shatt. Mm-hmm. And it was all about how leaders need to be better listeners, because the same thing. I mean, we're humans as leaders, and often we listen to half the conversation and we try to start formulating a response or a retort before the other person is even finished. One of the funny parts in that podcast was Ryan, our guest, he finishes this thought. He's like, what would be great is if there was just this silence in between the comments. And Ryan and I sat there for about a second, and then Will's like, yeah, but so it's like, we're like, you fucking ruined that perfect moment.
Yeah, I couldn't help myself.
Here
I am injecting another story. So
it's a podcast. We're supposed to talk.
It is a podcast. Yeah. So let's go there then. How did you guys get linked up and starting a podcast, Men Talking Mindfulness podcast?
Social media. It was like, hey, Jon had his epiphanies and enlightenment and started teaching, like mindfulness, like he was talking about earlier. And, he put it out there to the world on LinkedIn. We have some friends in common on LinkedIn, and we kind of linked up through LinkedIn. We started doing just a monthly, it was just good to talk to another guy, this goes back June 2019. And we just started doing like a monthly phone call, talking about mindfulness, talking about books we're reading. And we just would schedule it and just drop in for every 30 minutes every month. And
this was not recorded. This you're talking.
No. We just started talking. Yeah, just a regular phone call. And then the pandemic hit, and Jon said like, "Hey, why don't we go live on Instagram and start doing have a show?" And I was like, "Okay, cool." And in that moment, we said, "Let's call it Men Talking Mindfulness." And we did about a dozen or more Instagram lives, just talking about a particular aspect of mindfulness, and then we turned it into a regular podcast, and here we are 6 seasons later, over 100 episodes, and a small growing audience, and we're just really putting some work out there in the world, and people are really waking up and really enjoying it and sharing it. And I really feel we're really having an impact in what we're passionate about, not just teaching this, but just spreading, disseminating this information and make it in such an easy and digestible way that people can be like, oh, wait, so mindfulness can be, me eating differently. Mindfulness could be like me just going for a walk and without my phone sometimes, you know what I mean? Like mindfulness can be me finding my breath, so it's just give them, we have hundreds of different on-ramps to mindfulness, because it's just had such a, a big impact on our lives. And part of what I've enjoyed about this journey towards Men Talking Mindfulness and spreading more mindfulness across the planet is our relationship that we've been forming around this. I think that's a big part of the show as well, but it's also it's just become such a big part of my life, just getting to know Jon and produce something that comes from a place of passion and, something that's really fulfilling. So it's been quite a journey, and it's been a lot of fun, and it just keeps growing. And
what I think is cool about it is you have diverse backgrounds. It's great to have a yin and yang in that respect. Somebody like you, I think you were a self-proclaimed hippie, right? Will, do you refer to yourself that way?
I don't refer to myself.
I thought you did.
I think at some point I called him a hippie, and I said, "Yeah, you're self-proclaimed," and then we just decided to roll with it. And then like 6 months later, Will's like, "Hey, I never claimed to be a hippie, right?" I'm like, "What? What the fuck?"
I hate that term. I really do. Well, Jon, we're writing up our first, like, whatever, like
the
intro, right? And he's like, something about a hippie and a thing. I'm like, oh my God. I was like, but I'm thinking like, what? It works. Navy SEAL and a hippie.
It's catchy.
Like perfect.
Yeah.
It is catchy. Exactly.
It is catchy.
So
it draws your attention.
I don't consider myself a hippie at all. but I guess that's what I do,
And do you consider, are you going after a male audience as Men Talking Mindfulness, or is it just obviously you're men, so like a male perspective on mindfulness? Like, do you have female listeners? I'm assuming you do, but
the vast preponderance of our listeners are men.
Yeah,
it's about 75% or so. And the intent was, originally it was called Men Talking Mindfulness because it was just that. It was two men talking about mindfulness, and it wasn't necessarily targeted exclusively to men. And then we realized, men are dummies and they need to get this message. So maybe we should not only call it Men Talking Mindfulness because two men are talking about mindfulness, but because men need to hear this message.
Right.
And then we realized, everybody's dumb.
You'll get no argument from me on that one.
Everyone needs to hear this message. Sorry, I know I don't mean to insult your audience. I'm talking about us. That is inclusive, right?
Rare sense.
So we felt, hey, you know what? It's Men Talking Mindfulness. We do have some episodes that are still very men-centric, kind of targeted towards men and our challenges that we have to overcome, ego, being a jerk at work, and that's not male exclusive, but I think it is the masculine energy that is within all of us. And I don't want to get into the topic of toxic masculinity per se, because masculinity in and of itself is not toxic. But if you try to force your beliefs, whether it's masculinity, femininity, your religion, your political beliefs, if you try to force that on anyone, that's when things become toxic.
Yeah.
So we do talk about confined masculinity. We had Ed Adams and Ed Fraunheim on our show. They authored a book called Reinventing Masculinity. Mm-hmm. And they talk about, rather than talking about toxic masculinity, they talk about confined masculinity. Whereas a man or a masculine type, quite often the roles that we are accepted or we have accepted is the conqueror, the provider, and the protector. Mm. And anything that falls outside of those three realms is not acceptable. So if we are happy, where does that fall into the provider, protector, and conqueror? No, nowhere.
It's secondary. So to all those things.
Happiness shouldn't be an emotion that men should express. Vulnerability shouldn't be an emotion that men should express, or at least that's how society kind of sees masculine. Sure. But in actuality, there's many other roles, provider, conqueror, protector, for sure. Those can be roles that you fit into, but what about nurturer? What about, artist? What about creative? Those are all other roles that we can fit into just as well. So the other side of confined masculinity, I always screw this up, Will. What is it?
I'm right here.
The
other side of liberating masculinity. Living, all the the values that, well, like the merging of the masculine and feminine energy, that's part of us, all of us, and not being afraid to express, joy, happiness, patience, kindness, as well as aggression, anger. I mean, it's all part of our humanity, regardless of whether you're XX or XY, biologically. It's just who we are. And, it's a shame that men have just been thrown in this box, and it's, we can see what's manifesting now out of like decades and generations of men, just being, defined by three major things. And that's why I think it's, here we are having this conversation, three dudes, that have found these skills and these practices of mindfulness, and how much they've changed our lives. And we're able to have like an open conversation about it, and not feel ashamed or guilty, or, like doing this with like pseudonyms and changed voices or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. It's like, we're here. I mean, it's really happening. And go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that the way I get around that stuff is, I think our big problem that we have just as human beings goes back to this identifying idea.
Yep.
We get so wrapped up in identifying ourselves based on a whole bunch of characteristics that are superficial and that we didn't choose, right? Our gender, the color of our skin, our sexual orientation, all these things. Like when I look at myself, white dude, heterosexual, and I didn't choose any of that stuff, right? That's just how I happen to be in the world, right? And my experience sort of comes out of this body that has these characteristics. But it makes no sense for me to take pride in those things or feel ashamed of those things. It's just like the way I happen to come into the world, right? But we get so wrapped up in that we feel like then we've got to conform to some sort of societal standard that's been artificially created around those characteristics, right? And the more you can just think of, or for my sake anyways, think of myself as just an individual, and that's it. Like I'm just a human being, right? And I can express that and any way I want to, and it doesn't need to be tied to something as nonsensical as my skin color or my gender or something like that.
Right. We talked sense. We talked, I forget which episode it was, on Men Talking Mindfulness about othering, right? So,
yes, right.
Yeah. We all three of us just happen to be three white heterosexual men. And if we were taking so much pride in that, and if anyone did not fit that, they were being othered, right?
Yep.
Right.
And we actually see them as nothing but others, almost like objects, not other human beings.
Yeah, it's a shame.
But if we come back to what you just talked about, Chris, is identify as a human being,
right?
Then we can't other anyone, because we're all human beings.
Right.
I mean, maybe I guess we can other animals, but as far as the human race, we're not going to other anyone within that human race. We are all human beings. We all have our own hearts, our own desires, our own aspirations, our ideals and values. And that doesn't necessarily make us a bad person because of colors or race. Now, I will say, if their beliefs and values are infringing upon others' rights and privileges, that's when there's definitely things that can come into it. But just based on gender, ethnicity, color, sexual orientation, we're totally othering people, and that's when it becomes dangerous and really hurts.
Well, I always like to liken people as we are an experience. That's what we are. So I sort of not conflate, but I actually deliberately sort of conflate the idea of mind, experience, and me, right? I am the output of this stuff. I'm not this stuff. I'm the experience that's happening.
Right.
And so I liken it to a musical instrument. I'm the music. I'm not the instrument. Right. If you thought of my body as a guitar, I'm the music. Yeah. And so if you think about it in that context, everybody is just a piece of music. And if you hear beautiful music, does it matter what the instrument looks like? No. What you're concerned about is how the music affects you. Right?
Oh, nice. I like that.
So that's how you have to think of people. The actual person is the music. It's not the instrument.
Yeah, I agree.
Anyway, that's all deep. I'm like, gotta shake it off that one.
Thank you.
That's where we wanted to go.
So I want to get into our shared experience here now that we're an hour
Please.
in. But before we do that, the other thing I wanted to touch on is a little bit of yoga. Because, actually two things. I want to talk about yoga, and then I want to talk about the retreat you guys have coming up, because that's, I think, an exciting opportunity for people to interact with you directly and learn from you. So, but let's talk about yoga a little bit, Will, because that's something you're really steeped in. I know you practice a lot.
Yeah,
I do it a little bit, and I've gotten better at it in terms of commitment to it. But I want to just get your perspective on the importance of that for you, what it's done for you, and how that ties into even your mindfulness practice.
Yeah, I mean, my yoga practice has changed tremendously ever since I kind of got on the path of yoga. It was 2007. I think I started taking kind of like yoga classes like in 2000, and then that was when I lived in Philly, and then I moved to New York in 2003, and then I started taking practice seriously like 2007. And in the beginning, it was just a means just to kind of open my body and experience my body in a different way. And I went to I was going to power yoga classes in the beginning, so we'd hold poses for a long time and flow through the same sequence of poses very often. And I just started having all these different experiences in my body and like releasing all sorts of tension that I didn't realize was even so deep in my body from all my athletic pursuits, like growing up. So from I think one thing about yoga is people think of it just as the physical practice, like the asana practice, like, and that asana means poses, and that's moving from whether it's like warrior 1 to like moving through the whole like chaturanga, up dog kind of thing, down dog, like those are all the poses, and they're put typically the way the West expresses yoga is through like sequencing. So, you're in an hour class and you're moving through a particular sequence that, that keeps you on your feet, keeps you on the floor, you're on your back, you're on your belly, back bending, forward folding, and just really opening your body in a great way. But also there's other, there's 8, like the 8 sutras of yoga. They start with like, basically the 10 commandments, like how to be, how not to be. Right. But then we go into like pranayama, asana, right. And then contemplation into the mind, like into meditation. And then also, living for a higher cause, like giving yourself or understanding the divine nature of things. So it's like, these are all the limbs of yoga. And the physical practice is just such a great, incredible tool, which you're experiencing, Chris, Jon has experienced as well, to kind of rinse your body and your mind of like this daily stress and anxiety and the hardship of that usually just comes on just by having this physical, having our instrument, right? That keeps us walking in the world, right? Yep. Like that this instrument needs to be tuned, right? And if it's not tuned on a regular basis, and yoga is a great way of tuning your instrument. So not just to let go of the things that get in the way of like that higher frequency, but also to attune to that higher frequency. And part of that attunement is working with your breath. And that just not only helps us to be more present in the moment, but also helps to relax, more of that, like the deeper levels of stress and anxiety in the mind and in the body. And so it's a beautiful practice. It keeps me, I'm more agile. I'm much more balanced, like, not just mentally, but also physically. I'm more limber. So it gives my body the ability to, really be more responsive in the moment. And I feel like I haven't really been injured significantly in years, because of the practice of yoga. But when I'm really in the practice and really being led in a practice instead of me leading a practice or leading my own practice, but I just get to see myself, as a student and experience myself as a student and just also challenge myself physically. There's a lot of, people just think, when I started teaching yoga a long time ago and trying to get people interested in the practice of yoga and mindfulness, everyone was like, oh, yoga is just stretching, and it's so much, depending on where you go and the type of practice, and, there's different ways to practice. It's so much more than stretching here in New York very often. And I teach it as a way to challenge yourself physically so you can get to know yourself more mentally. And you get to use the breath as, the go-between between my catastrophizing a particular moment and talking to myself in a self-sabotaging way versus shifting over, being more present and using my mind as a way to, to empower myself and to be more inspiring and stuff. So, and and I see it help so many people. What are your experiences now, Chris, with yoga and how it's working for you?
Well, I'm a big fan of kind of multitasking some of these things, some of these ideas.
Okay. What does that look like?
Not always necessary, but we all have busy lives. And so if I'm trying to like do breath work and do meditation and do sauna and like all these other things, that all these biohacks we have to do today too. I got to dunk myself in an ice bath every day, and I've got to intermittent fast and all that shit that's out there.
Microdose and whatever.
Everything. Right? It's like, okay, one, I can't get overwhelmed by that. I can't do all of it. But if the things I'm going to do, can I get multiple bites out of the apple in one go?
Great.
And I know that for me, I'm kind of like a CrossFitter. I like to go hard with my workouts or high intensity interval training. And I need a little bit of balance in that regard in terms of what I put out physically. And I know that, and I have had to change my approach to the physical aspect of training for me. But with yoga, so it's kind of those things. One, I found that I really like hot yoga because room temperature, I'm not very limber. And so it was more difficult to get in these things. When you're all super hot and sweaty, it's just, one, it feels like I'm kind of getting a detox out of it, like I'm in a sauna. So I'm sort of getting that impact. Yeah. Two, it's just helping me move better. And it's an hour long. So I get breath work out of it. If I'm really focused on that, I'm getting stretching, which I definitely need. And I'm getting energy movement through my body, which I really like. I also like Qigong a lot, although that's a slightly different practice. But then if I can adopt the meditative part of it too, which I think is the real trick. To me, it's because you can spend an hour yoga class and your mind's just wherever and you're not paying attention to it and you're just thinking about something you got to do. Or if you really try to be present, like right for this hour, every time my mind drifts off, I'm going to meditate at the same time. I'm going to bring it back to like, am I right here, right now, paying attention to what I'm doing and present. And that's like 4 things all in once in terms of practices that I can do. And that's what I really like about it. So I do it once a week now. I think twice a week would be better, but I'm getting there. Like I said, baby steps. I find it better to adopt a practice, even in a very small amount, and get that habitual. And then you can expand it from there. It's just, I think, sets you up for having that as part of your life longer term if you do it that way.
I think so. Yeah, for sure. I think that the hot yoga for me really helped me to get in touch with my mind. Getting it, because like we'd go in New York and fucking really hot class, like 102 degree room or something like that. And you're doing the Bikram sequence is really big back in like whatever 2009, 10 or something like that, 12 here in the city, and just like really staying in the room, not trying to like lie down or step out of the sequence. And so it was a very empowering for me to watch my mind more, as I continue to try to move through these practices. And it's I saw some of your videos, I guess it was on Instagram, Chris, about you coming out of a hot class and talking about how much you're enjoying them. And I think it's great. I mean, whatever gets you, anybody who's listening to the mat, just to take on this, there's a reason that yoga's been around for over 5,000 years, because it makes a big difference on the mind and the body and how you are the citizen that you are in the world.
Yeah. So, and I'm also, I think what's helpful too is you got to go in. I mean, it's humbling for sure. I go in there and there's people in there doing handstands and splits and all this. And I am probably never going to get there, but that's okay. It's like you're not competing with anybody in the class at all. And, I just think it's one of those things that I want to make sure is at least some part of my life, that kind of movement for as long as I'm around.
Yeah.
So let's get into the retreat you guys got coming up. Is this the first one you've done like this?
It's going to be the second one. It's going to be the first one we've done on the East Coast. So we did one in September in Durango, Colorado. We had 7 or 8 folks there. It's 3 days, and we're going to use the same model kind of where we're there for 3 days, 2 nights. And we introduce what Will and I do. So that's right?
It's 4 days, 3 nights.
4 days, 3 nights. Yeah. Okay. So we introduce the meditation, the mindfulness. Will does the yoga, and then we bring in Dr. Teresa Larson, who does mobility and movement. It's not just one of the modalities that we bring. It's all three. So we're working on the body and the mind together, because as you heal one, as you improve one, you heal and improve the other. Yeah. They are inextricably intertwined. And this next one is May 18th through the 21st, upstate New York. And, we've got some interest in it. We've got some returnees from our last event in Durango. They loved it so much, they've signed up for the next iteration in upstate New York, May 18th through the 21st. And it's the Mindfulness Adventure Retreat. So we do some work, and then we talk, and then we go out on a hike, or we go ride horses, or we go sit around a fire and we share stories, and we all eat together, and we have mindful meals, and we experience the meals, and then we share what it is we're feeling in that moment, right? So much of what we miss out on in our lives these days, because as you mentioned, Chris, before, that we're all very busy, we're missing out on the emotions that we are experiencing, or that we could experience, be they good or bad. So we really try to get people into the moment. And again, that's through movement, through mindfulness and meditation, and through yoga. And it's with myself, Will, and Teresa Larson, Dr. Teresa Larson. She's a Marine veteran turned doctor of physical therapy. And it was just amazing. I think Will and I, we've been to retreats. I personally never been a part of the facilitating a retreat, but I was blown away just in the first evening. Like, we've done some meditations, we've done some yoga, we've done some movement, we're sitting around the fire, and the stuff that people experienced, the reasons that they were there, what they had experienced just in that first 12 hours, it was just mind blowing. So it is something that we want to do again and again and again, to really help people live that happier, healthier, more fulfilling, more stress-free life.
Yeah, it's awesome. So
that's
How many people can go?
We could take as many as 25 for this particular retreat. What's also we added to the retreat, or what was also part of the first retreat we did in September, is we had this 4-week integration program where we just don't leave you hanging with all these amazing like epiphanies and awakenings and practices that you kind of learn, but then we walk you through like a 4-week integration practice where we meet, and we'll, like, the first week we'll talk about mindfulness. Second week will be doubling down on breath work and yoga. Third week will be, the physical therapy work we've done. And then the fourth week will just be, we're tying it all together you really have, it's just a really complete package on this particular retreat. And where we're going upstate, I got a chance to visit. It's actually a Buddhist mission place that's been around. There's on 400 acres. They have like 12 Buddhist Korean monks live there. Korean Buddhist monks live there, and they take care of the whole property. It's like such an incredibly serene place. And where we're going like one of the most beautiful times in upstate New York, that third week in May, where everything just starts to blossom and, the spring is coming alive. So I'm really excited. I mean, to just take people to just this very, very beautiful location, and just its simplicity just speaks volumes already. So it's going to be a really good time.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Just if people want to look up that specifically or sign up, where do they go?
We can go to mentalkingmindfulness.com/retreat, mentalkingmindfulness.com/retreat, or Men Talking Mindfulness, on Instagram is all there. So thank you for that first opportunity to talk about it.
It's awesome. I'm hoping to join you guys on that.
That'd be amazing, man. I'd love to have you.
Let's get into our shared experience.
Yes,
where please. We went on a very specific type of retreat and had some interesting experiences. For sure. We all did tiptoeing around it here, but we all did mushrooms together. We did it out of the country, obviously. But we did it as an organized retreat. We did this about a year plus ago, something
November 2021.
2021. And it's really how the three of us met. So, Will, certainly I hadn't met you before. John, I don't think you and we didn't work together in the military. I don't think we had ever met either.
We'd spoken on the phone once or twice prior.
Yep.
Not.
In fact, I should point out when I wanted to start talking about mindfulness, just mind fitness, like everything that I talk about now, I remember I contacted you because I found out you were doing something similar, and I was worried about. Do you remember that? I was worried about stepping on your toes. I'm like, hey, is this okay? I don't want to like. And you're like, dude, rising
There's
tide
so much work
lifts
to be
all
done.
boats. Like it's
That's
totally
right.
fine. So, you don't want to kind of like steal somebody's thunder potentially. Not that I'm any better at any of this than you are, but it was, one of those things, right? You don't want to like,
I appreciate the
grab somebody's
professional courtesy.
Yeah. No, but you were like, dude, yeah, absolutely. And the more people we got talking about this, the better.
Yeah.
So let's talk about psychedelics. I've never spoken about it on publicly at all. So this will be the first time.
Here we go.
But I think it's important to talk about. I think obviously it's a very hot topic out there.
Very.
And I think, sharing our experience and our opinions on these things. And I'll say right now too, these are my personal opinions and personal experiences. And that's really important, right? What I say on here is not representative of any organization or anything like that.
Right.
So personal opinion, but so we went down and did this retreat and spent 5 days, I think, down there.
Yeah, I want to say it was 5 days.
With two ceremonies over 4 days, I think, right? And 5 nights, maybe. Yeah, it was beautiful.
Something like that. But we did this as part of it was an organized thing, communal group, and it was probably 24 people, something like that.
Yeah,
with us.
Yeah, we had a nice group. It was like 20, 25.
Yep, and there was
including the people. Yeah,
there was preparatory work as well. So we had a couple of group calls, like Zoom calls, with facilitators and other people to kind of get to know folks ahead of time, and then went on a series of flights to get out in the middle of nowhere.
It was awesome.
outside the country. But beautiful location. And then it's funny. I have a journal. I'm terrible about journaling as much as I espouse it as a principle. And I think it's great. It's one of these ones that I struggle with so badly.
It's tough.
But I wrote a journal when we were there, and I bought this on purpose before. I don't know if you can see that. For those of you who can't see this, who are just listening, it's on the cover. It says life. You can't just run away from your problems forever. And then it says me, I'm fast, very, very fast. And I felt like that was appropriate. But I read it this morning. I read what I wrote, and there was a bunch of stuff in there that it just goes to the why journaling is important. There were things I'd forgotten about how I felt about some of the things we practiced there. But I suppose we can get into the experiences themselves. But one thing that I want to say up front is the outcome of the experience for me, so much of what was beneficial went beyond just taking mushrooms, taking psilocybin. It was the integration. It was the breath work we did. It was the meditation we did. Mm-hmm. And it was the group setting. And that's something that I think it would have been such a different experience if I were by myself in a clinical, white-walled room in a bed with a doctor there. Not saying that's bad, but and that certainly could work for people. But the fact that we were all together experiencing this in sort of a, I guess, traditional kind of motif. We had facilitators who were watching us, who were, it was almost like shaman, right? They were singing, I don't know if that's the correct term, but they were singing songs the whole time, and there were candles, and we were sort of out in the jungle. And to me, that made such a difference. And then and then the time we spent together after everything we experienced. So, and in between the meals we ate together and just going out to the beach where we were completely disconnected from technology too. Nobody's on their phones. But I found that aspect of it so important. Just like kind of what you were talking about, your retreat, right? That piece of it. I remember sitting there and people are sort of telling their sob stories about why they're here and things that they'd experienced. And I think we go into these types of situations thinking, man, my story is so screwed up, right? I've got so many problems. And you hear, man, everybody else is pretty screwed up too, in different ways. Their problems might be different than mine, but it was just like, maybe I don't have it so bad. And maybe like we're kind of all in this journey together. So anyway, I don't know what direction we want to go with this part of the discussion, but
well, I mean, I'll jump in, and then we'll get into. Well, first off, I got to tell you, I got my journal here. Chris, and I'm not very good at journaling either. And I journaled there November 19th, 2021. And the previous entry in this same journal is dated May 23rd, 2014, 7 years plus before. But the title of my journal, and I hand wrote it, is The Journal of a Midlife Awakening. Instead of a midlife crisis, it was a midlife awakening. So anyway, I just thought that was funny. I had to share it. So I got to backtrack a little bit for the psychedelics piece. Will and I had been doing the Men Talking Mindfulness podcast for a while, and I moved out to Colorado Springs. I think we were still on Instagram Live. I'm not even sure if we had started officially podcasting yet. And I met with a guy. He had been a pilot, and he had gotten blown up and crashed, and he had some serious post-traumatic stress. And we met for coffee. I'd never met him before. We meet for coffee. He's like, "Oh yeah, I got to tell you, I went down to," and he named the country, and I did this journey on ayahuasca. And I was like, what? I had no idea. Because at this time I just retired from the military, like a month prior. In the military, we're somewhat fairly straight-laced, the zero tolerance policy for any type of drugs. So I didn't mess with anything, quote unquote, mess with. And I'm having this talk with this guy. I'm like, wait, so you did drugs to heal?
Right.
Like, in my mind, that's what I said.
Drugs.
And I think I went from that conversation and I called Will and I was like, yeah, man, I just had this conversation with this guy, former military PTSD. He did this medicine called ayahuasca, and Will's like, "Oh yeah,
I've done that 6 times."
he like knows all about it. I'm like, holy shit! There's a whole side of the world and healing that I don't know about, and I'm talking to people about healing their bodies and minds, and here's stuff that I don't know about. So let me get smarter on it. So I went and got Michael Pollan's book called How to Change Your Mind. Read through that, tore through it.
Yeah, me too.
And I was just blown away. Then read Stephen Kotler's book, Stealing Fire. Again, just blown away by the healing properties of these plant medicines. And Will and I are having these shows. I find out about the various nonprofits that are out there helping veterans with their post-traumatic stress through plant medicine. You've got VETS, VETS, Vets Exploring Treatment Solutions, and you've got Heroic Hearts, HHG, or HHP, the Heroic Hearts Program Project. And I speak to the founders of these, and I'm like, what in the world? And they told me that this was like going through 1,000 sessions of counseling in one night or in 2 nights, 2 ceremonies. And so Will and I talk a few times, and finally we get connected with this former Army Ranger, Neil Markey, who has since founded the Beckley Retreats through the Beckley Foundation. And, we're like, hey, well, maybe we should do one of these ceremonies together and experience it. So Neil reached out and he's like, hey, yeah, guys, if you come, you can share it on your podcast, talk about it, what it is you're doing, see if maybe other people from the podcast can come. So we end up in this undisclosed location outside of the country. And there we meet you. I think we all linked up at the hotel and had one small like puddle jumper flight from this area to like the middle of nowhere. And I mean, it was unbelievable location, away from like no connectivity to Wi-Fi or very little. I mean, only in certain spots. And it was just peaceful. And then we did that pre-work, right? So I'd done meditation, but I'd never done that really powerful breath work that like
holotropic.
I had never done holotropic.
That was trippy in itself.
It was super trippy. And I remember the shaman saying, hey, some people get more out of the breath work than they do out of plant medicine. And I was like, what in the world? It's just breath work. Yeah. And I came out of it, and Will was right next to me on that first breath work ceremony. And we were laying down on these beds, and we got these pillows right behind our heads. And there were 2 wet spots right behind my head. And I had been crying my eyes out just through the breathing. Yep. Like I had no idea that I could tap into that. Right. It was so powerful. So then, fast forward into that evening, And my personal experience with psychedelics was zero. I'd heard about it. Not psychedelics per se, but I've used cannabis, but I haven't used these types of psychedelics. And I get into it, and I'm kind of enjoying the experience. And I remember I start to get a little uncomfortable, and I flip my little eye shade up, and I see everybody else having their own experience, and I stand up. Will, I think you may have even seen this happening. I stand up, and I'm like, "Oh crap! I've forgotten how to walk." But I need I need to get to the restroom like really bad. And the one shaman comes up to me, and she's like, super nice, super kind. She's like, "Do you need more medicine?" I'm like, "Absolutely not." And she's British, so I'm like, I try to relate to her. I'm like, "I'm trying to get to the loo."
And you're smashed out of your mind.
That's so funny.
I don't even know why I did that.
You said that.
I'm like, I try to get to the loo. So she like helps me, and I come back, and then I tap much further into the experience. And this is where like it's tough to explain to people who haven't had a psychedelic experience themselves. Yes, my vision was kind of changed, but I actually felt visions, if that makes sense. So I felt this vision, and I journaled about it in the same journal here, of 4 children playing, and I was an observer from the outside. I've got 3 young kids, and I walk up to this group of 4 children. Again, this is not me seeing it. I'm experiencing this. And I walk up, and I notice that 3 of the 4 children are my 3 children. My oldest daughter, my son, and my youngest daughter, all playing, having a blast. And this 4th child is kind of ostracized from the group. And I turned this 4th child around, and it was me as a young boy. And he was being kind of ostracized from the group because he wasn't playful enough, because he lives life very straight-laced and lives kind of as Commander McCaskill instead of as John or as Dad. And to me, the message that I kind of downloaded from that was, fucking relax.
Yeah.
have some fun in this thing they called life, and have some fun with your kids. So I definitely wrote about that, and I've since tried to make a very concerted effort to play with my kids much more often and have more fun in life. And then, sorry, I don't mean to be dominating that. I've got one more story.
Go for it.
Yeah.
So then fast forward to the next ceremony. We do a breathwork ceremony again prior to, same experience, cry a lot, feel that just in the breathing. And then we get into the psychedelic experience. And I had gone in with the intention of forgiving and being forgiven, forgiving those that had wronged me in life, whether it was from the battlefield, whether it was from previous relationships, whether it was from my childhood, and being forgiven for things I had done and things I hadn't done on the battlefield, in relationships, and everywhere else. And I thought, okay, that's very broad, but let's see what happens. And I went in, and about halfway through the ceremony, I feel someone come and put a blanket on me. And I want to say thank you. So I lift my eye shades, and there's nobody there. And then that experience, kind of the experience of the vision, quote unquote, comes back, and I experienced this blanket that wasn't even there. There wasn't a blanket. There was nobody there. I experienced that this blanket was the forgiveness that I'd been seeking. And I had been blanketed with forgiveness. I was given the ability to forgive as well. And I came out of that, and Will and I did an episode of the podcast immediately after. And I think it was one of the most profound experiences of my entire life, and one of the more healing experiences of my entire life. And I'm a meditator and a mindfulness practitioner. I think those have a huge play and part in all this. But this was like just hitting the accelerator, right? That's what I felt. Those were my experiences. And then coming back to your point, Chris, about doing this in a clinic, I think there's absolutely value in that. But having the setting, the intention in your mind. I have since, here in Colorado, mushrooms are decriminalized, and I will openly tell you that I have tried them on my own here in my house. I had no responsibilities. Kids were away. I was by myself, and I did it Huge mistake. Completely different experience. The setting was wrong. The mindset was wrong. All I wanted to do was get out of that experience. I could not end that experience fast enough, even though it was the same medicine.
For sure.
Will, you want to chime in here? Kind of your experience with this whole thing?
Well, I mean, this is, I've been fortunate, I guess, being the hippie in this conversation, that, I have more access, to these drugs, right? No, not even drugs. Like literally they call them medicine because they really are medicine. Like I said, I've done ayahuasca, like I think 6 times now, which isn't a lot, compared to other people, but like, that's just given me a tremendous amount of insight for sure. I've done acid kind of recreationally, and, it brings me into such a beautiful place as well. And then psilocybin, I definitely have used some recreationally, but in ceremony, I do like higher doses, like 3, 4, 5 grams, which take you into that, give you more of that psychedelic experience. And, one thing that the way I've begun to speak of psychedelics and why they're useful is we can't, there's higher states of consciousness or dimensionality or that we cannot possibly achieve through sobriety. We just can't. Like this, I feel like the psychedelics or breath work, like that holotropic breath work that we worked with, was developed by Timothy Leary to supplement taking acid trips. Because like there's certain that's why the holotropic breathing kind of gets us into that trippy place as well, because we're actually robbing the brain of just enough oxygen that we can have a psychedelic experience just from breathing. So so every time that this experience was wonderful. And one thing I think we should talk about or mention is they had us journaling through the lens of accessing living your future self, right? Like
yes,
who you want to be.
Yep, that was in here.
After this experience. And that helped me a lot, right? So just even journaling about it, I don't have, you guys are so funny with your journals, like showing them right here. I don't have my journal with me right now, but I do journal all the time.
I'm showing this as proof that I've journaled in my life. This tiny little thing.
There's another 3, guys. There's no
I know.
Well done.
Kicking our ass.
Anyway. And so from the experience itself down there, like each psychedelic experience takes me right into my heart. Like it takes me into this instead of like it just being this, the mind starts to play with like, fractal designs and stuff is kind of moving when my eyes are closed, and it's really fun and trippy. But, I didn't experience any like major visions or anything. I just a lot of the psychedelic experiences I've had take me right into this heart space, into the kindness and the love and the patience, and then it starts to show me where I haven't been so kind and so loving or so patient, and also times that I have. So it's like for me, it was this constant like flow of different experiences the whole time, all like moving, teaching me about the heart, teaching me about how important it is to be kind, to be patient, to be humbled, and how to live that way. And it was like, I was, crying at times and laughing and just actually sitting up, and they had, you guys remember the music that we had, like they just played this Amazing. Beautiful music that helped to move this energy through us the entire experience. Like, they're playing guitars and singing bowls. I remember the singing bowl, Chris, and you really cracked wide open on one of that singing bowls at one time. And so it was just so beautiful. And especially like, what I'm on, as I'm continually becoming more of this teacher, and now I'm studying more of compassion is where my work's taking me. And a big part of compassion is this common humanity. And we're able to like not just do it in a setting and staying in our own lane with eye masks on and not really connecting with each other like verbally or doing the best we can not to. But we come out and talk about it. It was such a great, like you mentioned earlier, Chris, it's like, it's not like we're fucked up. We're just literally trying to let the light in to experience more love, to experience a deeper connection to ourselves and more loving to ourselves. And therefore we can be more loving to other people. And I came out more humbled, more kind, more loving. I have two new brothers here as well because of that experience. And it's just, I don't know. I really enjoyed seeing everyone else transform there as well, and hearing everyone's story. And it was just such an amazing, amazing time. And then I think I received a lot of benefits out of it afterwards. Like Chris and I, we did the 4-week integration program. And, I've talked about it before on the show, but this is like the apartment I'm in right now is because of that experience. Because it took me, like they took us through the 6-week integration course where each week we worked with a different part of that future self. And we were asked to meditate on whatever those things that were coming up, from the experience, but also like from our vision of our future self, and kind of literally authoring our own life. And I just would sit in these meditations, just see, a big, beautiful place with lots of light, big place, lots of life, big place. And then sure enough, in New York, I mean, it's fucking hard to find a good place in New York. And I stumbled into this place, luckily, and I fucking saw it, and I moved in as quickly as I could. And it's literally all the stars kind of aligned. And it's from that experience, I'm living more abundantly now. And that's kind of what brought me into this space I have, physical space, and then just open up the abundance of my heart and my mind, and things have really just transformed drastically since our time together, in 2019 or 2021. That's awesome. Yeah, it was good. It feels amazing. Well, you had quite an experience, Chris. Do you want to talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, I
loved the work that you were doing down there, and your willingness to jump in, and you just went there, man. And it was, you did. I mean, congratulations. It was beautiful to see, beautiful the way it was, and heart wrenching at the same time. But like, I think Jon and I know what my experience is because I've been in these ceremonies before. When someone is going through a deep experience and wrought with all sorts of sounds, emotions, and stuff, like that's what they need. And I was like, oh yeah, Chris is going there.
Well,
you want to talk about it?
Yeah. Well, man, I have so much to say on this topic. Like, I feel like this could probably be broken into a couple of podcasts. But so first off, I would say I came from a background obviously similar to Jon's. I was in the military for a long time where there's zero tolerance policy. I wasn't really interested in taking any kind of drugs. I actually come from a family where there was alcoholism in my family growing up. And because I saw the effects of that, and I should say not abusive, it wasn't, but my dad really struggled with alcohol when I was younger. But he got sober when I was, I think, about 11 or 12. But I remember seeing him in the hospital when he was detoxing from that and what that did to him physically, and thinking, I'm never drinking alcohol my entire, like, I'm never going to go there. So I'm somebody who grew up in high school very straight-laced. I went to parties where people were drinking, and I just was like, nope, not touching it, which was great for them because I would drive people around, drive people home. But things change. I got into college, and eventually, and then actually have had a fairly storied history myself with alcohol, not to the point of, whoa, sorry, what is that?
Life is complicated.
Life is complicated. That's
life is complicated.
Coming from the universe.
It was just Rich Harris.
Thank you, phone, for reminding me, telling me about my complicated life. So anyway, that was
perfect.
But look, and then I've had my own, and I would say continue to have some kind of struggles with alcohol. Not alcoholic, but certainly, like, it's a substance that I know I have a challenge with in terms of my relationship with it. But I never took any kind of drugs. I mean, to this day, I've never, other than this experience that we had, that's the only quote unquote drugs I've ever done in my entire life. Never smoked pot. And I'm not necessarily all that interested in it. And the psilocybin stuff, man, it took me so much to get up the courage to go do that. I was and somebody who's like struggling with anxiety, it's like how is this going to work? Because this scares the shit out of me.
What was that, Chris? What was that moment, if you don't mind? What was that moment? You're like, you know what? I'm going to do this. Like, was there a particular something or other? I
mean, look, I'd done so many other treatments, and both mental and physical, and I don't know. I got linked up, Jon. Somehow you and I got connected. I talked to you like that you were going to go do this. And then talking to Neil, and Neil put me in my comfort zone a little bit, and he showed me stuff that, look, and I should be clear, I'm somebody who, I'm not out there proselytizing that everyone should go do psychedelics. I think it's, I'm not recommending any of this stuff, but I think that's to each his own. But if you're going to go do it, I think you need to do it in a very safe and with a lot of intention is really important. So look, I talked to a lot of people who had been through similar experiences on various different psychedelics. And part of what I got to was, okay, if I'm going to go do something like this, speaking to an earlier point I made, let's not jump in the deep end first. Let's not do the hardest thing possible. Let's resist that urge and let's just kind of walk in the shallow end. Because if we're going to jerk the wheel a little bit here, maybe it's better to just, that's something I'd found, especially with chronic illness type things, is like jerking the wheel is a bad idea. Like it's really good to sort of like nudge your way over. And so I had actually done some ketamine ahead of this. So I guess technically that's the other quote unquote drug that I've done, because that seemed to be looking at all these different things. Like that's a really sort of soft entry. It's controlled. You're in a clinical setting. It's an off-label treatment in the US. So you can do it legally in the United States. And so I was like, well, let me go try that. And I mean, that's a whole nother conversation I could have, but I'd had a good experience there overall and I'd learned some things. And so it was like, okay, I think if I'm going to do something else, this seems to be the sort of gentlest thing. I've heard it called a teacher. It's natural. I like that aspect of it. Mm-hmm. And so it was, and then I talked to Neil and it was like, look, comparatively in terms of something being dangerous, like psilocybin is way less dangerous than alcohol even, or tobacco, or you basically can't overdose on it.
Right.
Like nobody dies from it, essentially. I'm sure that's not 100% true. Maybe it is, but it's about as safe as you can get if you're going to do this, especially if you do it correctly. So I finally had to be like, just go do this, right? Like just make it happen. And so going into the ceremony was the first one. It's funny reading through my kind of notes here. I actually was more calm than I thought I would be. And I will say one of the things, even with all the preparatory work, I was still, I think, had an expectation in my mind of what it should be that was erroneous. I had read How to Change Your Mind. That helped me as well. Reading that book really kind of like, but because of that, I had this expectation, which is bad, going into something, experience like this, that it would be very visual. And Michael Pollan even talks about like when he's doing this and he gets up and he has to go to the bathroom and he's like pissing diamonds, and then he comes back and the woman who's working with him, like her face completely changes. And so it's like, okay, there's going to be some serious visual stuff going on. And so we drink this kind of tea, right, that they had the mushrooms in. And I'm like staring out in the jungle and just going, okay. I mean, I'm waiting for like a tree to melt or something to turn into a beagle or something like that, right? Like something like that. And I'm experimenting. I got kind of eye shades down, look, and then open. And I don't know how long went by, but nothing happened. And I finally sort of sat up and I looked around and I could tell that everybody else stuff was happening. Like the looks on their faces or the way their mouth was oriented with their eye shade down. It was like, wow, everybody else is experiencing something here and it's not affecting me in any way.
Can I just pause real quick?
Yeah.
I remember after the second one, you must have walked past me at some point.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying.
My mouth was like hanging wide open. Yep. And you're like, afterwards, you're like, dude, you were gone.
Yep.
I don't know where I was, but I was not there.
Yep. Yeah. I remember laughing about that, just being like, wow, he is out there. So look, the shaman could tell that they're just sort of whispering and pointing at me like nothing's going on over there. And they came over and they said, what's going on? I'm like, nothing. Like, I don't feel anything. I felt a little bit of warmth in my stomach, but nothing quote unquote psychedelic. Right. And they said, well, do you want some more? And I was like, I guess, I don't know. So they come over, she's like going to give me some more. And it was just the raw stuff. And by the way, the facilitators do a little bit as well, because it's part of sort of like being in the same energy, like not nearly the level we do, but it's like getting kind of on the same level to some extent. Mm-hmm. So one thing that that I didn't realize going into it, but when you're on this, your pupils get enormous, right? Like they just turn into saucers. So her pupils, I remember her in front of me, were just huge. And she gives me, and I'm like, am I just supposed to eat it? And she laughs. She's like, oh, I forgot the tea. Hang on a second. So she goes back. And so she comes back, and I said, how long have we been doing this? She was like, time doesn't exist. And I'm like, okay.
Oh, Jesus. Here
you're having a good time. So I take this again, and sort of the same thing. Some amount of time goes by, and there's still kind of nothing. And I don't know if that was if like physiologically I've got sort of a resistance to this, or I think that I have a very, very strong ego, quote unquote, meaning sense of self for me is like super rooted, and it takes a lot to shake me off of it. And I remember this. Luckily, I remembered this when I did ketamine. The same thing kind of happened to me, where we did it intravenously to start, because I was like, trying to be smart and be like, let's go with the baby steps first, lowest amount possible that's going to give me some kind of experience. And I just kind of felt sort of drunk. I felt like just kind of drunk. And it was like, well, I don't think this is enough. Kind of give me some more. And I kept being like, I think I need more. And when finally I got to this point where it just like pushed me off a cliff, and I completely lost my sense of self, everything. And I remember coming out of that, and the guy who's with me, who's kind of laughing at me. He's like, I knew you were going to push yourself over. I just let you do it, dude. Like, and so I'd learned from that I need to do the work. I need to do some work. And it can't just be like a drug where it's like, this is going to just do something to you. Like you have to work with it. That's kind of the point. Right. Like it's a teacher that's going to show you some things, but just like anything, you're not just like a passive participant here. You've got to be proactive. So I remembered that in the moment when they were going to give me even more. And I said, nah, let me try to work harder here, so to speak. And one of the girls came over and kind of sang to me and did some stuff. They were even going to do some of the, hoppy, the stuff that they blow in your nose.
Oh, arapa.
Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I don't know what that is. Like, I don't want to do that. But it eventually kind of happened. I remember I got up and went and I was reminded of this reading it in my journal, but I went up and went to the bathroom, and I came back, and the jungle just looked different. It wasn't like weird trippy stuff, but there was like an energy to it. It was like glowing. And I was watching a bat in the dark fly around in a way that I'd never experienced before. Like when you see bats, usually it's like they just sort of like flash by your vision, either at dusk, like in twilight. But I could see every flap of the wings of this thing in the dark. And if you remember, we were on that platform, and I, for whatever reason, sort of positioned myself at the head of this platform where all these cots were, or all these mattresses.
Yeah. You're in the center. Yeah.
And I said, I was like, does anyone else see this bat that's flying around over here? And everyone else is doing they're in their own experience. So that was kind of the beginning of it. And then for me, it turned into, I just started thinking about, again, I had very, very little, if any, sort of visual stuff, the colors and everything a little bit, but it was so vague that I even read in my journal where I'd written about it afterwards. Like, I really don't remember. Like, I knew it kind of happened, but I couldn't pick out exactly what it looked like. And it was so minimal. For me, it was almost like it just laser focused my thinking, where I started thinking about the fact that I have so much to be grateful for, and I'm not very grateful for it. Like I have so much to be happy about, and yet I resist the temptation to be happy about it. And I thought about my family. It was like, you have everything you need. You don't need to chase anything else. You don't need to go chasing happiness. And that thought just like all this, you guys remember this, all this emotion came out of me. So I started kind of crying a little bit, and then it turned into like really crying. And then it was like screaming, wailing. And it was just this energy that was coming out of me. And it was so visceral that it was like a workout. I'm like, I'm so loud crying, and I would have to like catch my breath, like, and then go at it again. And I remember being like, sorry, everybody. I felt like I was bothering everybody. And I just remember being like, sorry, everybody. And a bunch of people kind of chuckled a little bit. And then afterwards,
I think some people applauded you, like cheered you on. If I remember,
yeah.
They knew you were doing the work.
Yeah, and because this went on for hours, and eventually I got up and walked up to the kind of the main area where the dining hall there, or the place where we would eat, just because I felt like I must be bothering people, and they kind of walked up with me, and I realized I'm monopolizing the time here on the discussion, but this is something like, if I were to really, I think, talk about this entire experience, it would probably be a few hours of going through each component of it. But I would say the short version of it is the key insight for me was it made me really examine myself and like what I was doing to myself. Because the other thought that came back to me was thinking other people were judging me out there for things that I may have done in the past or not done in the past, or failures from my time in the military. And this realization of like, nobody is judging you but you. Like, you are the only person doing this. And you may not have loaded up a gun and put it to your head, but figuratively, every day you were putting the gun in your mouth and just pulling the trigger over and over and over again. Right. And man, that thought was so profound to me that I was like, there was just so much. I mean, it's even like charging me up right now thinking about that. But yeah, for me, it was just, and I remember them coming over and saying, I was like, sorry about all this. And the woman you were talking about with the British accent, she was like, "No, this is good. This is divine energy," is what she called it. And and then my second experience was pretty similar too. And the lesson I learned from that was, man, you had tamped down a ton of emotion. Like, you had stored so much negative emotional energy in you. I didn't even think something like that was possible.
Yeah.
And the other thing that was so helpful was in the integration piece after these journeys where we talked about it with each other, was I sort of apologized again to everybody, like, hey, I'm sorry and they were like, no, you doing that actually allowed, a bunch of people said this, allowed me to do kind of the same thing. It wasn't quite as loud as you, but it helped me kind of release a bunch of emotion. And man, there's so many lessons I got out of that, but that was one of them. And it was just how necessary that is, however you go about doing it. This idea of like not suppressing emotions. And if you have them, you got to figure out a way to release that energy, emotional energy, right, in a healthy way. And it was just so enlightening, man, because it was so different than what I thought it would be. Again, I thought it would be this sort of visual, trippy, and that's not what it was at all for me. And it was hard. It was not pleasant. And even afterwards, I would say my experience afterwards, I had to do a ton of work. I had panic attacks afterwards. I had anxiety sessions. Some of the check-ins with those follow-up calls, I was like, hey, I'm actually doing a little worse than I was beforehand. The experience was helpful, but it was like, I had to commit to so much work afterwards. And I just think it's so important that, again, I'm not somebody who's just kind of out there like, everybody should go do this. I think that they have their place. You need to go about an experience like this like it's a marathon you're training for. And the experience is the marathon. So you have to train ahead of time. You have to take care of yourself afterwards, recover appropriately, and take it seriously. It's like a serious thing. And it can be therapeutic. Again, I look back on it now and I'm like, man, that really taught me a valuable lesson. But it was a hard lesson to learn. And I'm glad, again, that I was with other people. To me, that was such an important thing, is that everybody's experience is going to be different. Right? It's not like just some drug that's going to have the same effect on everybody. It's like it's an experiential thing, and it's going to teach you something. But it's going to be individual to you, and you have to be smart about the entire thing, take it seriously, and do the work. But if you can be with other people, I just think to me, that was so valuable, man. Like talking afterwards, talking in between it, being able to follow up with one another. Right. It was sharing with folks. Anyways, I've been talking for a long time.
Even this, what we're doing right now, a year and 2 months later, a year and 3 months later.
Yeah,
I feel this is a part of it. Yeah. This is a part of that therapeutic piece, because of the relationships that we formed there because of being in that same ceremony together and knowing that, and, I knew Will was doing work. I knew you were doing work, Chris. You two knew that I was doing work. We all knew that everyone there was doing some type of work and that there was work to be done in that moment, but that there was also a lot more work to be done afterwards. It's not a one and done thing, which actually I would love to kind of throw out a question. Would you do it again? Would you do it again, Chris?
So there's I
have.
Yeah,
I know you have.
Right.
I know you have.
Yeah. I don't. Here's my thing with sort of psychedelics in general, I think, is one, something like psilocybin, it's a mushroom, right? I mean, it comes from a mushroom. I think we can synthesize it, but it's a naturally occurring substance. And the idea that we're okay in general with lab-created pharmaceuticals that will prescribe to tons of people, something like opioids, that will kill 50,000 people in a year. And that's okay. And that's a good, quote unquote, quote, good drug or legal drug or okay drug. And something like psilocybin, which is a natural, it's a species, right? It's a naturally occurring species. And we're going to say that's illegal. We're going to outlaw a species, which is pretty arrogant of us, is crazy to me. That is insane that we do that and that we accept that and that we agree that that's like okay or normal or makes sense. It's just, it doesn't make sense to me. And then specifically for these things too, is to your point, Jon, no, I mean, would I do it again? Potentially. Do I have any desire? No. Like it might be something that I only do once or I guess twice, right? And in the course of those 2 days in my entire life. I think it's important if you're going to go do something like this, you have to know why. You have to, there's got to be a reason. It's not just like to go trip out. I mean, like, can you do that? Sure. To each his own, right? But if you look at it as a medicine, if that's the way you're going to treat it, not as a drug, but as a medicine, then you are treating yourself. And you have to be very clear about like what you're trying to treat, that intention going into it, and then being able to do the work. To me, it's something that before I did it, I had somebody who was experiencing these kinds of things say, psilocybin is kind of like it's a teacher. It's going to teach you something, but it's up to you to learn it and integrate it. And I think that that's right on the money. But no, I don't have any desire right now to go do it again. I felt like I got out of that what I needed to. And I had a much better relationship. The other awakening, I should mention this. The other piece of that experience that I had in the second time was I had kind of ramped up. My whole thing was like trying to get rid of my anxiety. And I had ramped that up going into this second experience because like coming out of the first one, I was almost like a little hungover and, it's a lot you go through a lot, right? Jon, I think you were too, right? You felt like kind of hungover after the first one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I wasn't doing myself any favors and I was going into it with a little bit of trepidation and nervousness. And it was affecting me physically a little bit because of that. So I'm lying there after we take this for the second ceremony. And it's like there's tension in my chest and I'm starting to worry about that. Like, oh my God, is this giving me a heart attack or something? It's like the worst thing you can do. And this is the part I do remember about visions. It was like dark. I had the eye shades down, but there was scary stuff. It was dark. It was like monsters and everything. And after struggling and resisting for, I don't know, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, I just made this decision of like, what if we just let this be? Like, don't resist it at all. Just
lean in.
Right.
Yeah.
And I am not kidding. Almost like it's a cliche. Instantaneously, everything turned to no shit, like pink rainbows, bunnies.
Hippie shit.
Yeah. But most importantly, all the physical pain disappeared. Wow. And it was like this, it felt literally like a big slap in my face. It was like, you see, like the fear is the pain. Do you get that? Like the resistance you're pushing back on this, your fear of it is the problem. It is the pain. And man, that was such a profound, like, it was just like a you fucking dummy type of thing to myself. Right. And so, I mean, and those, again, were important lessons. I don't feel like I have a lesson that I need to learn right now. And it's not to say that I don't, I might, but I've still worked with that too. I mean, like you mentioned, the envisioning your future self. I actually read, I'd forgotten about that. And I read it this morning in this, and I was like, I'm still kind of missing the mark a little bit. I'm still not quite there. And that was a good reminder of, you gotta recommit to that. You know what you should be, and you're close, but you're still holding back on some, and that includes even having this conversation. Like, this is the kind of thing that would scare the shit out of me before to talk about this, whether it's fear of stigma or even like legal, like you're going to get arrested because you're going to talk about psychedelics at this point, everybody talks about it. I think we're good.
Right.
Joe Rogan and Sam Harris and everybody, but and I don't want to speak for anybody else and what they're doing out there. And like I said, it's not like I would even tell anybody like, you should go do this. I just think if you're going to, it's important to do it correctly, and,
for sure,
and intentionally.
It's a great teacher, like you said. And I also think, like, my experience with ayahuasca, I did a ayahuasca ceremony. It was Memorial Day 2021, so I had quite the year then. And I didn't touch it 5 years before that. I had many opportunities. Like, I'm part of this group, and every 6 months they would have, hey, we're having another ceremony. Hey, we're having another ceremony. I'm like, nope, not time. Nope, it's not time. Nope, it's not time. For 5 years. And then it was like, wait, now it's time again. And I think there's like, when you're ready, it'll be there, or maybe you'll never have to do this again. But I feel like, it's there, and it's been in our society. It's been part of our cultures for since the dawn of I think it's part of a lot of scientists are saying, like, it's made us, it took us away from the ape and made us into the human.
That's a theory.
It's part of the theory, right? The stoned ape theory. So it's like, there is something about like us, I
didn't realize it was called that stoned ape theory.
Stoned ape theory. Yeah, exactly.
That's funny.
And, it has its time and its place, but it has to be, like you said it, both of us, I know you said it, John, it's like, it just got to be respected. If you're going to do it in ceremony, and it's like, work with the right shamans, like, do the work, prep work ahead of time, do your research. Like, it put me at ease before my first experience was with psychedelics, was doing ayahuasca. And I studied it big time, like watching documentaries, reading about it, trying to understand, talk to people. And I was like, okay, I could do this. And I went in and like, one thing that, like you had said, Chris, it's like, not fighting against it. Actually, the Beatles, one of my favorite songs, I think we might have shared it on the retreat with you, is their Tomorrow Never Knows. And it goes, relax your mind, turn off your mind and float downstream. You're not dying. It's like, they really explain it very well. And that's that whole lean in to the experience. And if you just listen, lean in, do the work like you talked about, by leaning in a little bit more, finding more of your breath, whatever is going on in those moments in that experience, it could really just have some incredibly revelatory effects on the rest of your life.
Yeah.
It's real. I'm so glad it's more mainstream now than it's ever been.
Yeah. I do think that, my concern with it becoming so trendy and so out there is that people will jump into it too quickly. Right. And that it will lead to, what happens too often is, because of that, it gets kind of too many people kind of get into it that are not doing it correctly, quote unquote. And that leads to some bad experiences that then allow people to jump on and say, see how this isn't a good idea. And, we overgeneralize things. Right.
Right.
So that's why I think it behooves everybody to treat it with the respect that it should have. And also realize, one of the reasons why I do the content I do is because I want people to feel empowered to do this kind of work their own. Like, you have so much power in your own mind. John, you prove this through what you have done to improve your own existence without any type of drugs or intervention or anything. You have so much power. And unfortunately, the messages these days are a lot of disempowering. It's a lot of, you need this medicine, you need this drug, you need to go to therapy. And those can all be good things. But we should start with realizing how much we can do on our own, and only go to those things, I think, when not only go to those things, but think of those things as augmenting or helping in some way when you are at an impasse or you are struggling and but it can't be for lack of trying on your part to just, again, understand how much mental fortitude you have and power to change your own experience. It's just,
I agree.
I just think it's so important because too often the message is just the opposite these days.
Yeah, we're powerful individuals, and these the psychedelics that really help us to if we're willing to listen and watch and do the work, it'll show us our power, and then it's like then you come out of the experience like, hey, now what do I do? With this new power that I'm more aware of, and
that's it. You're more aware of it. It's been there the whole time.
It's been there the whole time. It's always been there. It's always fucking been there. But I think it's also, to come back to that common humanity piece, it's like we get to empower each other, by having this conversation, by making it more like, okay, it's okay to go in this direction and do these kind of things, but then also, keep rallying around those epiphanies that we're having from the psychedelic experience to remind ourselves of that greatness that we did experience in that psychedelic experience. And then how do we bring that into life outside of the psychedelics? Like, what are we going to do with this opening of the heart, the awakening of the mind, this shared connection that I've seen so many times through psychedelics. Like, oh my God, I just love more. I just want to connect more on a deeper level and let go of all like the frivolous bullshit that we kind of like talk about so often. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So,
well, anything else on that, guys? We've been talking for 2 hours here. This is
man. When I saw that schedule, I was like, "Holy shit! What are we going to talk about that whole time?" And now we're past that. I'm like, "Wow, it's super easy."
Yeah,
I don't know if there's anything else on that realm.
The disclaimer that you got to put out there is none of us are medical professionals.
That's right.
In shape, form, or fashion. So we're just sharing our experience and what we got through it. But if you are, seek out that medical professional, somebody who has a lot more knowledge on this than we do, and then see what works for you.
Okay. So, why don't we wrap this up, guys?
Yeah. Brother, thanks so much for. Oh man, it's been really, like I said, this is part of the healing process. Getting back with you guys, we should do it more often.
Where else can people either collectively or individually find you guys in terms of your content, connect with you, whatever?
Yeah, go ahead, Will.
So I'm at willnotfear.com, WILLNOTFEAR, willnotfear.com, and Instagram Will Not Fear, everything Will Not Fear. And then also, John and I have the podcast, Men Talking Mindfulness, and we have a retreat. And if you're in the city, I teach a public class Mondays at 6:00, 90 minutes of breath work, meditation, and movement. So we come to a live class and have some fun. That's me.
There you go.
In a nutshell.
I just can't get past the Austin Powers. This is me in a nutshell, right? Yeah, so I'm on johnmccaskill.com/links. If you go there, that'll give you access to everything that I'm involved in, my social media, my email, my newsletter, everything else. So yeah, I'd love to be connected with you guys if you're listening and answer any questions that you may have about what Will and Chris and I have talked about. So thanks for having us, Chris.
Awesome, guys. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right.
Peace.
Peace.